Okay, so normally I don't use a microphone. So how are y'all hearing me? Do I need to use the microphone? All right, if y'all feel like I need to, y'all holler at me and I'll use it. But normally I can speak pretty loud. So we'll see how this goes. So first off, I'd like to thank you guys everyone for joining us today. So my name is Jairus Munson. So I'm currently a lieutenant at Station 15 that's in Glen Allen. So we were invited to come out here and kind of do a presentation for you guys today and talk about some different aspects of fire safety. And so that's what I'm going to kind of kick off now. Does that sound good with everybody? Yep. Yeah. All right. So when I go over some of this stuff, it's going to be interactive. So y'all feel free to answer my questions and talk to me. And if y'all have a question, please ask it. Some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, y'all might actually have questions about, like why we suggest doing some of the things that we suggest, and like how we operate in some of these emergency situations. And so I want you guys to understand how that works and why we do some of the things that we do. And hopefully y'all will walk away from this with a little bit of knowledge and background on some of these stuff on fire safety and how the fire department operates. Does that sound pretty good? So I was kind of talking to a couple of y'all before we started. It's been a long time since I have been assigned to a district that serves Cedarfield. So when I first started my career 23 years ago, I was assigned to Station 9. And so Station 9 was the one that was the primary responder to Cedarfield for the first 6 years of my career. So I got to come over here quite a bit. But then they moved me off to the other side of the county, and I haven't been over here that frequently. So I was just trying to remind myself how y'all were set up. So how many of you guys are living in the apartments that are kind of on the left side? Oh, wonderful. Large majority of you. How many of y'all are in the cottages? Handful? Okay. Anybody on the assisted living side? Healthcare? Okay. So when we go over some of the things and talk about some of the fire safety aspects, it's going to kind of be broken up into where you guys live and what the safety aspects are that are built in to the facility that you guys live in. And so when we talk about some of these things, that's where some of the safety aspects are going to come in, as far as what's your plan if there is a fire alarm or is a fire in your place, of what you should and shouldn't do. Okay? So the first thing that I always like to start off talking about are these big red things that are on the stage up here. Anybody recognize these things? Fire extinguisher? Do y'all have one of these in your home? No? Yes? No? Okay, we got a whole bunch of them. Okay. So where do y'all keep these? If you have one, where is it at? Counter next to the stove? Under your kitchen sink? Okay.
Closet next to the kitchen.
Closet next to the kitchen? Wonderful. So that's one of the interesting things that we always talk about is fire extinguishers, right? And one of the most important things is to understand how to use it. So if you have a fire extinguisher and you need to use it, there's going to be a pin that locks the handle down to hopefully keep you from accidentally discharging it while it's in your house unintentionally, right? So the first thing we're going to need to do is pull this pin out. And so once you pull that pin, you're going to be able to depress the handle, and that's what's going to cause the extinguisher to start discharging, okay? And so once you pull that pin, you're going to aim at the fire, the base of the fire that you're trying to put it out, and you're going to depress that handle. And once you depress that, you're going to start to sweep back and forth to put that fire out. Does that kind of make sense? Okay? So one of the other things that I like to talk about is the size of these extinguishers. So when we look at the different sizes of these, what do you think one of the main differences is as we get bigger and bigger and bigger? The weight and the size of the fire that they can put out, okay? Now that's one of the things that I like to talk about with different groups that we go out and talk to, because yes, it'd be nice to have a big extinguisher, okay? But what's going to be your limitation with that big extinguisher? Yeah, being able to pick it up, right? So if the pan on the stove is on fire, you're probably not even going to pick that thing up to squirt it on the stove, right? It'd be a whole lot easier to have one that's smaller and a little bit lighter to use, a little bit more maneuverable, right? And so that's one of the things that we always talk about is these smaller extinguishers, even though they're smaller, if you're using them at the right time, they're going to put out a nice sized fire and it could save your kitchen if it was the situation, right? So the other thing is where this should be placed. So I'm not knocking y'all that told me where you put it, but if you have a fire that breaks out in your kitchen, do you need to be able to get to this quickly?
Yes.
Okay, quickly. So it shouldn't be behind a whole bunch of stuff underneath the sink where you got to move the soap, the sponges, the dishwasher tablets to get to it. And more than likely shouldn't be in the broom closet where you've got to move the mop bucket, and all that stuff to be able to get to it, right? It needs to be easily accessible so that if you do have an emergency, you can grab it quickly and use it appropriately. Does that make sense? Okay? So, the next thing that I like to talk about with this is when you think about your living situation, what are some of the areas in your home that are probably prone to catching on fire? Kitchen. What else? The dryer, electronics, electricity, right? So those are all areas that it's great to kind of talk about, right? So in the kitchen, everybody loves to cook, right? Everybody likes to cook and eat. And so that's one of the areas that's the most dangerous that we talk about, right? So some of the simple things that we go over is, should you ever leave food cooking on the stove?
No.
No, okay? So if you are cooking, you need to be right there with whatever it is that you're tending to, right? And stay with it. We shouldn't leave a pot of boiling food on the stove and walk off, and go watch TV, because what's going to happen? We're going to forget about it, and that's going to increase the risk of it catching on fire, right? Now the next thing we talk about with that is fires that occur inside the oven itself. Okay? Y'all ever burn food in the oven? Yeah? Well, the good thing about the oven is that it's actually made to hold heat. Okay? So if you do have a fire that breaks out the oven, you burn your toast or whatnot, and it catches on fire, it's going to smoke up really bad, but it's relatively safe inside that oven. So one of the things you don't want to do in that situation is open the oven up and leave it open. You want to try to keep that closed. Does that make sense? Okay? And the same thing we talk about with the stoves. One of the things that catches on fire the most on top of the stoves are oil-based fires. Okay? So one of the things we always like to remind people is if you do have a pan that's got grease in it or oil in it that catches on fire, the last thing you want to put on it is water. Okay? If you put water on that fire, it will actually cause it to get bigger, because that water is going to boil inside that oil, and it's going to throw the oil up, and it's going to cause it to immediately catch on fire. And so it'll look like it almost explodes when you put water into an oil fire. Okay? The easiest way to put out an oil fire, if you got it, is the lid on the pan, right on top of it, right? So we think about that, right? If you're frying something or cooking something, even though you might not be putting the lid on it to cook with it, we should probably get that lid out and have it beside us just in case we have to put it on that pan if something catches on fire. Okay? Any questions about those things?
I have a fire extinguisher, but I also bought what's called a fire blanket.
A fire blanket, yep.
Do you use that as a lid?
So you could, all right? Now understand that when we talk about fire blankets, they're made out of a material that doesn't burn as easily as some of the other materials are, right? So they're not a bad idea to smother a fire with them, right? Ideally, if you had a tight-fitting lid, that would be better because it's going to suffocate the fire quicker. But if that's something you have, you could use it, okay? And I know those are kind of the rage. There's been some advertising on TV, and especially on like Amazon and stuff with those fire alarms. So, any other questions on those? No? All right, so somebody else brought up some other areas of concern. So electricity. So electricity is something that we do see issues with occasionally, but not that often, as long as the electricity is contained and used appropriately. Okay. So one of the things that y'all might run into that we like to caution people about are extension cords. Okay. So if you've got something that's plugged into the wall and it won't reach where you want it to, a lot of people will plug it into an extension cord. And so we need to understand that we can overload those extension cords and have too much on them where they will overheat and catch on fire if that's the situation. Extension cords really aren't made to be permanently in place and to supply power for long periods of time. So you need to kind of pay attention to that, right? So one of the things that's better to use in those situations are surge protectors. So those have a built-in breaker in them so that if they do happen to draw a surge on them, then hopefully it will kick that breaker and cut that electricity off before it does cause a fire. All right? So that's one of the other areas that we see some problems with is that. Anytime you have extension cords, especially during the holidays, you want to be very, very cognizant of where you put them so they don't wear. A lot of times we'll see extension cords that go underneath of a rug where people are walking. That provides wear and tear on that extension cord, and that can break down over time as well and become a problem. All right. Now the other thing that y'all talked about that was interesting was dryers. So y'all all have a washer and dryer in your apartment? Yeah. So that's another thing that we see a lot of catching on fire. So what is it that's inside the dryer and the vent that's really, really flammable? Lint. Okay? So lint, when you do your laundry, accumulates very easily inside the dryer and inside the dryer ducting. And so it's a great idea to make sure that you're cleaning that out frequently so that it doesn't build up in those situations. Okay? So I recommend that if y'all, have any issues with lint accumulating in your dryer vent, I'm sure y'all have maintenance here that y'all can call and get them to vacuum it out or scrub it out to make sure that it's free flowing and doesn't cause any backup like that. Okay? How often? It all depends on how much lint your dryer accumulates, right? I've got 4 kids at home and a wife, and we do laundry like 2 times every day. And I'm finding myself out there cleaning the dryer vent out probably every year to make sure that it's clean. We do a lot of towels, and so that's real linty, and we get a lot of lint buildup.
I've always gone by the precept of after every load, clean the lint filter.
So you're talking about the lint filter, which is great. I'm actually talking about everything that's behind that lint filter.
Yeah,
okay?
but if you don't clean the
Lint filter, yeah, the lint filter, yeah, you need to clean that every wash. But I'm talking about everything else that's behind the back of that lint filter that you don't realize gets all, messed up and clogged up as well. Okay? So yes, sir.
We were talking about lint.
No, go ahead. What you got?
Sprinkler systems.
Mm-hmm.
How much smoke and how much fire does it take to activate?
The sprinkler system? Okay. So the sprinkler systems that are in buildings like this have a little fusible link in them that does not respond to smoke. It only responds to heat. So when it reaches a certain temperature, and most of them that are in these facilities are right around 110 degrees, when they reach that 110 degree mark, it'll pop, and that will allow the water to start coming out of it. Okay? And so that kind of answers that question. So it's not made for smoke, it's made for the heat aspect of it. So if you actually have a flaming fire, it's going to pop off to put that fire out. All right? So as far as your smoke detectors, y'all are going to have smoke detectors in your apartments as well that they're going to go off as well, right? And so it does not take much to make a smoke detector go off. They respond to a lot of things other than smoke. So, you know, if you have steam in your apartment, it can set off your smoke detector, as well as, you know, just a little bit of like dust and particles. So like if you go in and knock up a lot of dust cleaning, that can actually set it off as well. Okay? And so those smoke detectors are meant to alert you that, hey, something is going on, and you need to, you know, be aware of what it is and be alert to what that situation is, right? So that kind of brings up a good conversation point about where you guys live, okay? So if you're living inside of the main, you know, building over here where the apartments are, when that smoke detector goes off, it's going to start to set off some of the fire safety features that are built into this building, okay? And so anytime you have a large area where people live, there are going to be fire stops that are built throughout the building, okay? And a good way to recognize a fire stop is that it's going to have large doors that are shutting on the edges of those fire stops, okay? So if you think about it, when you go down, if you live down one of the wings, when you go down that wing, is there a door? Yep. 2 of them. So when that smoke alarm goes off, there's normally magnets that hold those doors open that are going to automatically close those doors, okay? And so those doors are going to shut. And the reason behind that is it's a barrier for that fire, okay? And the smoke to try to slow it down and to give whoever is on the other side of it a chance to react and either put the fire out or get to safety, okay? Does that make sense? Y'all follow me on that? Okay? The other thing that it actually does, it will actually change the heating and air condition in those wings. Because if you can imagine, the HVAC is going to pull smoke and push smoke as well, right? And so it's going to change that and shut it down so it doesn't spread that smoke and fire throughout the different wings and past those fire stops. All right? So that's all built into the fire protection system that's in there, right? Now, somebody was telling me earlier that those sprinklers, when they go off, they're going to dump a ton of water. And so depending on what it is that's on fire, it should get it under control quite quickly, okay, depending on what it is. The larger the fire, larger it gets. If it's got any type of oil or fuel to it, it's going to take it a little bit of time, but it's going to get it under control. And the one thing that we're always worried about with that is the smoke that's going to be kind of emitted as it's putting it down, because a sprinkler system that puts out a fire is going to create a lot of smoke as well. So you might actually think something is really, really burning, well involved in fire, just because of all the smoke that's created while it's trying to snuff out that fire. Yes, sir.
Yeah, our policy here is, in the event of a fire, you stay in your apartment.
Yep.
Until somebody tells you to leave.
Tell you to leave. Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yep. So what we call that is protecting in place. Okay. So your door that's on your apartment is also fire rated, and all the sheetrock that is on the inside of your apartment is fire rated. So if your neighbor 2 doors down, if their apartment catches on fire, okay, it's got quite a bit of material that it's got to literally burn through in order to get to you. Does that make sense? Okay? So in a situation like the apartments here at Cedarfield, one of the things that we recommend that if you're not in the fire room itself, okay, that you stay put. And so what will happen is if you're in that fire room, you've got to get out to safety, all right, because your apartment's on fire. But the other ones, if you stay put, what's going to happen with the sprinkler system in that room? It's going to go off. And the goal of that sprinkler system is to put the fire out before before it extends past those walls, right? So in that event, hopefully the fire gets put out quickly, and all we've got to mitigate now is the smoke and water damage, okay? And everybody else is safe inside their apartment, and we didn't have to worry about evacuating, okay? Does that make sense? Does that kind of answer your question? So we do recommend that. And that was kind of the next thing that I was going to kind of get to, is talking about that protecting in place, okay? So when we talk about a fire apartment catching on fire, the apartment that catches on fire we're concerned about, and the next one that we're really concerned about is the one that's above it, okay? Because fire normally goes up, all right? It takes a little bit longer to go sideways and even longer to burn down. And so most of the time what we'll see is that the fire will travel up void spaces to the apartments that are just above it, right? But remember, the goal of that sprinkler is to do what? Put the fire out. So if it activates quickly and efficiently and does its job, more than likely, we're just going to have a lot of smoke that we're going to have to deal with. Okay? Now, I wanted to talk to you guys about what we're going to do. So what we're going to do when we get here, depending on where it's at, okay, we're going to make access through the stairwells that are closest to where that fire apartment is. Okay? So if you're thinking about the wings, more than likely we're going to make access from one of the wings, go up that stairwell, and come in to wherever it is that we think that fire apartment is. Does that make sense? Okay? And so we're going to bring hose up with us to either connect into the stairwell to the fire department system, or to one of the sprinklers, one of the connections that are inside the building itself. Does that make sense?
Do you inspect those valves?
Valves and everything. So no, I don't. That's part of the overall inspection of this entire building, and those fire pumps and all that stuff have got to be inspected here. Okay. And they actually flow test the fire pump for the sprinkler system and all that. That's done annually as well.
Do we have to do that, or do you do it?
No, Cedarfield have got the contract with a private company to do that. Yep.
The alarms themselves that go off.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the point is to get your attention.
Mm-hmm.
However, for some people, the amount of sound that comes out of those alarms actually creates waves that hurts your ear. I literally have to go and shut the door in my bedroom in order to be able to tolerate the fire.
Yep. So I don't know, I'd say that it's doing its job to make sure everybody is well aware that something bad is going on, and to protect yourself, right? So I would recommend that if y'all are there, to just be cognizant that, hey, there's a fire alarm going on, and to just keep your ears open to somebody knocking on your door to try to get you to either leave or to get you to safety if they need to. Okay?
If you can hear it over
You can
the
hear it,
alarm.
yeah. You can hear it over the alarm, yeah. But you also got to understand that more than likely the person that's coming to get you guys, they're probably going to have a key in their hand to get inside your apartment, okay? So it's either going to be maintenance, one of the staff people here, or us. We're going to be coming and unlocking the doors and trying to get you guys out, if that's the case, right? And more than likely, like I said, we're going to encourage you to stay in place unless it's one of those situations where we have to get y'all out, for y'all safety. Okay? Yes, sir.
When the fire stop doors close, do they lock or just close?
So they just closed. There should be panic hardware on them if they have any type of mechanism to where when you push on them, they will automatically open. That's a good question. So it kind of brings up another thing about like housekeeping. So when y'all are kind of looking around at these things, make sure there's nothing in front of those doors so that those doors can close easily when those magnets kick out, right? If there's an extension cord or a plant or something that's blocking them, if it blocks them from closing, they're not going to be able to do their job, okay? So one of the other big points of this is to make sure that you keep your doors and windows closed, okay? So somebody was asking me earlier about if you have a balcony, if it's a good idea to go outside on the balcony during a fire alarm, okay? So I'm not opposed to you going outside on the balcony, but when you walk outside, you need to close the door behind you, okay? Why is it that I'm concerned about open doors? Airflow, oxygen, right? The more air, the more oxygen that comes into the building, it's going to feed that fire. And so I want to mitigate that as quickly as possible, all right? So you guys don't have to worry about this because y'all got nice sprinkler systems. But like we just had a huge fire down the street in one of those apartment complexes that wasn't as well sprinkled, you know, as Cedarfield is. And so one of the things that really helped that fire spread quickly is open windows and doors, okay? So once those windows and doors get left open, it can move from one apartment to another really easily. And so we really want to keep that stuff closed. So if you leave your apartment, make sure you close the door behind you. Don't leave it wide open, okay? Any other questions? Those are great questions about the alarm and the sprinkler system.
When the alarm goes off and goes to your station, what do you communicate with Cedarfield and vice versa?
So that's kind of complicated. We don't communicate with them at all. So normally what happens is when we get the alarm, it gives us, it depends on what side of the building it's coming in on, it'll give us the room number. So if it comes in over here, it'll say, 352 or whatnot. And so we've got a pre-plan that we have in the building that shows us where the rooms are. And so we're going to be headed to that area right there. So a lot of times security and maintenance are really, really good. So they're going to be headed there ahead of us. So if they get there ahead of us and they isolate what the problem is, a lot of times they're communicating that with us that, hey, it was, burnt toast. There's no fire, it's just burnt toast, or whatever that situation is, so that we know what it is. So when y'all have a true smoke alarm go off here, it's depending on how it comes in, you're probably going to get at a minimum of 2 engine companies in a truck.
6 minutes.
Yeah, and if you get the full fire response, you're going to get 5 engines and 3 truck companies and 3 supervisors and 2 ambulances. So there's going to be a crap ton of people rolling up in here, and y'all are in the middle of the West End. So like literally within 6 minutes, you're going to have probably about 5 or 6 companies showing up at the same time, unless they're doing another call or another call service.
So we don't have a particular company that is set up for Cedarfield,
Meaning what?
like the West Air Fire Department or 13 or.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you're talking about a station.
Yeah.
So in Henrico County, all of the fire stations are divvied up into what we call districts, right? And so when you look at Cedarfield, the way Cedarfield sits, it's in 22's first due, which is right there on West Deer Parkway, right? And so it's a lot that goes into that based on what we call small reporting areas and whatnot, but that's geographically going to be the closest unit that should be able to respond to you, right? But when you look at where y'all are located inside of the West End, Station 9, which is on Quioccasin, Station 12, which is on West End Drive, like all of them are within, when you draw that circle, are within about a 7 or 8 minute response window. So all those companies can get you really, really quickly. So they got a real fast response.
Yeah, we live down at the far end of Cedarfield Lane. We back right up into the forest and the woods behind us. When it's really hot and dry, like it's been this summer, I worry a lot about forest fire and the very narrow exits to get out of here. Is there any sort of a plan for evacuating the cottages close to the woods if there's a fire in the forest?
So, I mean, as far as evacuating you guys, like, we normally don't have the wildfires that they have out west, right? So out west, because of the dry, arid environment and the way that the trees are, in the forest, the national forest out there, they get a lot of wildfires that get, they'll be 100 foot tall inside the trees. Around here, we normally don't get that. So like, when we have a wildfire, normally it's the underbrush. And so the fire that's actually burning is just burning the leaves and debris that's on top of it. So we don't really get really hot wildfires. And so as far as evacuating you guys, that would probably be the last thing that we would ever have to do, because we're gonna get in there real quickly and start to isolate that burned area and to put it out. So, because like the backside of this backs up to Deep Run Park, right? Yeah, and the swamp back up in there. So more than likely what would happen is if we did get something in there, the fire trucks would pull down behind y'all's houses, or those cottages, and we would set up a perimeter to protect those cottages from any fire that was burning towards you guys. Does that make sense? So, a good question. All right, any other questions? So back to the fire safety aspect of it. We kind of have talked a lot about the apartments. So let's hit real quick on the cottages outside, because that's a little bit of a different ball game, okay? Because inside those cottages, you're going to need to be able to get out of the cottage itself, okay? So it's not like the apartments here. If your cottage catches on fire, hopefully it gets put out quickly, but you're going to need to be able to get outside of the cottage quickly, right? So when we think about that, wherever you are inside of the cottage living, like inside your bedroom, we always want everybody to think about having 2 exits. So the main exit, like the easiest way to get out, would be through the doors and out the front door, right? But then the second means of exit would be like if that was blocked and you couldn't get out your normal means, what would be the secondary means of exit that you would have? Windows, yes. So we think about that as having the windows and that aspect of it, right? So if you're in your bedroom, you're gonna have to open up your window and be able to crawl out your window, okay? Think about the 2 exits in each bedroom, all right? So when you think about that, what are you normally met with when you go out the window? Shrubbery, okay? So think about those things as far as what's on the outside of it, okay? One of the things that I've talked to people about before is if you think that, it's going to be a rough landing, you could take the comforter off your bed and throw it out the window in front of you, so that, what do you do when you land on it? Yeah, it's a little bit softer than whatever it is that you were going to land on, right? So that's something else to kind of think about. There's no two stories in the cottages, so I don't have to worry about telling you how to get out of a second story window.
Yes, there are.
There are 2 stories?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
It depends on the cottage.
Cottage itself, okay. I thought most of them were first or one level.
Most of them.
Most of them are. So that brings up something else to think about is what happens if you're upstairs and you have to come out. So again, you're gonna have a window. So if there's an area where you can safely climb out and evacuate the structure, that's great. But if not, you want to keep that window shut to keep air, the wind from coming in, the air from coming in and spreading that fire. But at the same time, you want to notify us that there's something going on there, right? And so back to the sheet, it's not a bad idea to throw clothes out the window or to hang a sheet out that window and shut it, so that when we get on scene and do our lap around the building, that I see that, hey, there's a sheet hanging out that window, so that means somebody's in that window that I need to go get right now. Does that make sense? Okay? And if I'm walking around and I find a pile of clothes on the grass, I go, that ain't right. And I look up, okay? Because believe me, like I've gone in some of these houses and some of these really nice neighborhoods, these houses are beautiful, but they have windows in places I would not expect windows to be. And I'm walking around, I look up, I'm like, yep, there's a window. And it's on the 3rd story attic space or whatever you want to call it, that's up there. And it's not exactly a space that I would necessarily thought to look for somebody dangling out the window. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I lived in a 2-story house and kept a fire ladder under every bed.
Bed.
And when I had guests, I said, in case there's a fire, there is a ladder.
Yep. Did you ever use one of them?
No.
No?
Well, I did.
Yeah, I was gonna say, fire ladders are great, but if you haven't ever used one, you might wanna use them, because they're not exactly easy to use, they're really wobbly. Your kids will probably love it, they'll think it's fun, but they're really unstable and kind of hard to use. But what this thing is, you've got a plan in place, and when something like that happens, okay? All right, any other questions?
I think that a lot of the windows are stuck.
Okay. That's something I would look into, and what how well those open and close.
That's why they're replacing them.
Yeah. So I mean, definitely in the cottages, that would be a concern to me, is making sure that all your windows operate appropriately, your doors are operating appropriately as well. Okay. Great question. Yes, sir.
The answer to that, the project that is going on this time, according to Jack Johnson this morning, replacing all windows,
All windows.
including the cottages.
Okay, wonderful. They're already working on some of that. Yeah. How old is this building? These buildings now? 27, 30 years old? Yeah, it's about that time. Start redoing roofs and redoing windows and doing some good maintenance. So.
Roof's already done.
All right. So one of the other things that I like to talk about with the fire safety stuff is a lot about like the advances in technology, right? And so when we look at some of the advances in technology, y'all talked about some of them already, the sprinkler systems, the alarm systems and whatnot. Some of the other things that are out there that I like to show, because some people have seen these, are things like this. Has any of y'all seen one of these before? So this is an interesting thing called stovetop fire stop. Okay? So this hangs up inside of the hood, of your range. And just like a sprinkler system, it's got a little fusible link here where if you catch your stove on fire, it's going to empty the contents of this can on top of your stove. And so the goal of it is to put the fire out that's on your stove. So this is it's called stovetop fire stop. So just like the fire blanket you were asking about before, there's technology out there that's like this that is kind of neat. So in higher risk areas, if you had something like this, it would kind of try to minimize some of the risk of a stove fire.
Looks like sterno.
Yeah. But actually, the first time I saw it, I thought it was a can. Like, I said, is that a can of tuna fish? Like, no. So I don't know. Some of y'all might have some of this technology in your apartment already. I don't know, but the other one that we talk about are the technologies that are built into your stoves. Okay. So most everybody is familiar with the eyes that when you turn them on, they start glowing red hot. And if you take the pot off of them, they're still red hot. Okay, so they're always hot when they're on. Okay, there's technology out there nowadays where the burner is actually an induction burner. So the burner actually stays cold to the touch. You can turn it on, and it's cold to the touch, but when you put a metal frying pan on it, the metal actually heats up. So the stovetop is cool to the touch as can be, but it only heats up the metal itself. Have y'all ever heard of those? Yeah. So those are some of the things out there because it decreases the risk, like if you touch the stove, of you actually getting burned, but more so if you had like grease that was popping out of your pan, of it actually flaming up and catching on fire as well. So there's some benefits to some of that technology that's out there. And some of those induction burners, like they make these now where you can replace your old style with these newer ones if you wanted to, right? And so the technology's out there. I just like to bring that up because you might see some of that the next time you go to the appliance store to replace your stove. You're like, hey, what is this? And when you talk about, those are some of the kind of safety features that are out there now, new wise, okay? All right, any other questions for me? Good?
How much power do these charging stations, I mean, plug in your phone to charge and the speaker and this and that and the other? It seems like there's a lot of power going into this little charging station, and yet, you know, they sell them like this isn't the way to go, or buy outlets.
Yeah, so you're kind of opening up a can of worms. So the actual charging cord that you're talking about, the block that plugs into a USB cable, depending on what size of block that is, could be up to 20 watts, okay? Which, in all honesty, other than where it plugs into the wall, that connection piece, that block and that cord are relatively safe. Like if it were to, you know, it's not going to heat up, right? All right. Now, the thing that you need to worry about is actually what's inside of this. All right. This is where I said the can of worms is going to get opened up. So the charging cord is relatively safe. All right, but the batteries that are inside of the devices now, they are getting to the point where they have an extreme amount of power inside the batteries, okay? So lithium-ion batteries are actually becoming a little bit of a problem for us because the metal that's inside, the way that battery is made, it brings everything that it needs to burn to the table immediately, okay? So we think about fuel, we think about oxygen, and we think about heat, right? Being the kind of the three pillars of creating a fire, it's got all that stuff right there inside that battery. And so what we find is that over time, when you're charging and discharging your phone, that battery starts to swell and get weak, all right? And so if it's ever damaged from that swelling and whatnot, it can actually spontaneously combust and catch on fire. And so not so much with your cell phones, we've seen this with like scooter batteries, those hoverboard batteries and things like that. We've had that happen quite a bit, okay? Not so much on the cell phones, but definitely on the, you know, lithium-ion batteries that drills work off of and other, you know, like I said, power wheels, things like that. They have been known to just catch on fire in the corner of the room while they're being charged. Okay? So that's one of those things to keep in mind. Like I said, now I'm not trying to scare you about your phone, but definitely if you've got a device that has a large battery, it's a lithium-ion battery, like maybe a wheelchair. So you know a lot of people as they get older have like those power wheelchairs and whatnot. Those are lithium-ion batteries, and if they're damaged, they can cause a problem. All right. Any other one?
I know that one of it was on the news, in an airplane, in the carry-on bag that was up in the thing, the battery in a laptop caught on fire.
Yep.
And that was a problem. So laptops can do it too if they're not.
Any of them. So and like I said, you're asking questions I'm gonna have to look up now. So there's 3 different battery technologies that are out there that are, I'm not trying to say problematic, but that have that ability to do that, right? And so laptops, anything nowadays that is powered by a battery that gets recharged multiple times is operating on that same technology. And so we're just seeing a whole lot more of them because you think about it, like before we started looking at some of the mobile devices and like Teslas and all the electric cars, we really didn't see batteries that were built to a scale that were huge, right? You'd have a little battery that you put in your flashlight or whatnot. But now we're getting to the point where we've actually got batteries that are huge. So like in a Tesla, there's over 8,000 cells inside of a Tesla. And so you think about that, that's like a little bitty firework. There's 8,000 little bitty fireworks inside of a Tesla that if one of them fails, it's gonna basically, escalate to the rest of them failing as well. And so something like a laptop battery, depending on how many cells is in it, they can rapidly, heat up and start to catch on fire, just like, you talk about that plane. And depending on where it's at, that could be a big problem. So, yes, ma'am.
Talking about batteries, just the regular, let's say 9-volt battery that we use in different appliances, is there a problem in storing them, or should they be stored correctly so they don't explode?
Yeah, so when you talk about storing batteries, one of the things you need to make sure you're limiting is the ability for them to actually make a connection, right? So like you storing batteries loosely in a bag is not a good idea. They need to be stored where positive and negatives are not being able to be connected. Same thing with that 9-volt battery. That 9-volt battery, if you're to connect those two pieces on the top, that's going to connect that circuit, and whatever it is, it's going to heat up that battery and that wire that's making that connection. So we just need to make sure that, the 9-volt batteries have a little plastic top on them, or all the rest of the batteries you're talking about, your AAA and AA's, that they're not connecting while they're laying there. Good question. All right, so as far as the fire safety thing goes, just to make some highlights as we're kind of wrapping up, and y'all can ask questions if you need to. So if you're living in your apartment, one of the things that we recommend is that if the fire alarm goes off and it's not your apartment, where do you go? Stay inside, okay? Make sure your doors are closed, your windows are closed, and we're going to protect in place, okay? Wait for somebody to knock on your door to escort you out if needed be, okay? If you're in the fire apartment, and it's your apartment that catches on fire, what do you need to do? Get out. When you leave the apartment, what do you need to remember to do? Close the door behind you.
And
okay?
don't lock it.
Lock it.
Don't lock it.
Most
So,
of us leave them locked.
well, you laugh, but like that's one of those things where if I'm leaving an emergency, I'm probably not going to remember to leave it unlocked. Like if it automatically locks, it's going to lock. So hopefully you have your keys, so that whoever it is, maintenance comes, you can go, yes, it's in there. So in your apartment here, that sprinkler system is going to go off relatively quickly, right? It's going to be a lot of water. So when we're coming up, that's one of the things we're kind of looking for is which apartment has all the water coming out of it, because that's where we know the culprit's going to be, right? So there's going to be a lot of water, so be aware of that as well. When it puts the fire out, that it's going to create smoke. So get to where you can safely breathe outside in the hallway, and make sure that you're safe and that you're looking for either maintenance or the staff to be coming, or us to be running up those stairs looking for whatever the issue is. Okay? All right? So if you're in a safe place, is it okay to call on your cell phone and call 911? Yes, most definitely. Okay? So if you're safe from the fire or any of the emergency, and you have your cell phone with you, please pick up the phone and call 911. Okay? Because it's going to connect you to the dispatcher. And what are they going to be able to do? Ask you questions. And you're going to be able to give them real-time information that they're going to give us. Okay? And so some of the questions that they're going to ask you that I do not get from a general alarm is how many people are in your apartment. Okay? So like if you made it out and your loved one is still inside, that's something I want to know immediately, right? And you can say, hey, I made it out. My husband is still inside. He's in the bedroom, okay? Or the back bedroom. All right? Don't forget your husband. All right? So other than the husband, and I don't know if this comes into play here either, the other thing that we always get told are pets. Like my dog is in the back bedroom, okay? And so that's one of those things where if we're safe enough to make a pet rescue, we will make a pet rescue at all possible. Okay? So they're going to go to give us that information real time as opposed to the generic fire alarm that we get that just says there's a smoke alarm in room 253 or whatnot, right? And so we're getting that gives us a whole lot more information. And what's even more valuable is when y'all are telling us that the fire's out, or it wasn't a fire, so that we can start to modify the units that are responding and clear them up quicker, because we know that it's not a real fire, that it's somebody burned toast or whatever the issue is. Okay?
But if somebody burns the bacon and they don't want to leave, what are your instructions for them? That
Burns the bacon?
And the smoke is everywhere.
Have breakfast ready when I get there? And honestly, if it sets the alarm off, right, just make sure that you call down to the security desk and notify them that you burned the bacon. And like, again, if you can call 911 as well, if you're safe, and just say, hey, I'm in whatever apartment number at Cedarfield, the smoke alarm is going off, I burned the bacon, that lets us know what's going on. It just keeps everybody in. And you can stay, as long as you're safe and you feel comfortable, you can stay in the apartment. Okay?
In my situation, I'm on the first floor, and I have a port and an entrance outside. Would it behoove me to get myself outside and close doors behind me, rather than?
So that's up to you. That's up to you. But yes, that would be safe. I'm expecting that if there's a sidewalk or something outside that would protect you. Yeah, I think that would be good. So don't lock yourself out that door either. Make sure you take the keys with you.
We have apparatus in our hallways to signal a fire. Do you recommend doing that if it were my apartment and I'm exiting, or should I go out?
So I guess the question I need to ask is, has it already gone off, or is it not gone off?
Well, it's gone off.
Okay, so I mean, I don't care, I don't mind if you go out there and pull that as well. So those pull alarms are for when the smoke alarm actually hasn't activated yet. Okay, so like you actually see that there's a fire or an emergency, and you're manually activating that, right? So, either way, if you do that, that's actually going to give me information as well, because if I know that I have a smoke alarm that's going off, and now I have an active pull station, I know that one of y'all have made the decision to walk out in the hallway and pull that, and that something is legitimately wrong. Okay? And that's the same thing with the sprinkler system. So that's another dead giveaway for us, is when the sprinkler system goes off, it sends an alarm as well. So the last thing we want to be is responding here with a smoke alarm going off, a sprinkler alarm going off, with a manual pull station. If of all three of those things have gone off, one of y'all have lost your mind and gone out there underground doing some crazy stuff, or we've got some legitimate problems. So, don't pull the fire alarm. It's a nice day outside. We want to go outside and play. That happens at school, not at Cedarfield.
I think I want to have a fun day like the little kids and have you bring by the fire trucks and show us all the technology now that's been on fire trucks since we were little kids.
Little kids, we're fine. No, I mean, if that's something y'all want, I don't see why we couldn't make an arrangement to do that. If y'all wanted to do like a show and tell. Yeah. But you're the one that set this up? Okay. Well, email Byron and say that
I said I wanted to
have the fire truck come by.
so we can see all the, be like a little kid and see all the technology that's on the fire truck now compared to when we were kids.
Do y'all have any like,
You want a trip to the firehouse?
We could.
I was gonna say, do y'all do like a community day or a family fun day or anything like that here? No? I'm just trying to think of maybe a bigger event where we could come and actually set up and do something.
I hate to mention this, but I think it's been solved. 3 times in a row, I was taking a shower, and the steam, and then should I have called it, because everybody, fire people came, everybody came. If we'd called right away, and said it's steam, it would have kept y'all from coming.
Not kept us from coming, but it would have kept everybody from coming. Okay? So that might be not something y'all realize. So if we have a fire alarm that gets initiated in the county, we have to go and investigate it. So that means that either one unit has got to show up and confirm and get information for our report. So in that situation, one engine could essentially show up, talk with you, get your name as the person that, witnessed everything that went on, and document that it was steam that set the alarm off, and go over with it.
Call anybody. I guess maybe because of the alarm.
Yeah, and that's where picking up the phone and calling 911 is a little bit quicker, because it's gonna connect you right to our dispatch center, right? It's like if you call downstairs to maintenance, maintenance is gonna have to do the same thing. Or worse off, if they call the alarm company that y'all have, that Cedarfield has a contract with, it's just gonna take longer and longer to get to us, that information, if that makes sense.
Something that has happened that, if you're out doing errands or whatnot, and you come back and there's fire trucks sitting in the main area and you can't get by, the protocol for that is what?
You're stuck, just pull over to the side of the road. Yeah. So, the question came up about what to do if we're blocking the road. So by all means, if we're blocking the road, please try to pull off to the side to give us room to work. Don't get close. Like if you can give us 100 foot or more behind around those apparatus, that way we can back up to get out of the way or to move equipment if we need to. Just give us a little bit of time. I know it's an inconvenience. A lot of times it's at the worst time, right? But we're trying to just check on whatever that situation is that's going on. It might be a medical emergency. It might be a fire alarm or whatnot. And we'll try to get that stuff moved out of the way as quickly as we can. Just please be on the lookout for us as well, because we're always running around.
Once the sprinklers are tripped, how are they turned off?
So there are shut-off valves for each branch, and so that's where maintenance comes in. Because a lot of times, unless it's a place that we've been to frequently and had to shut them off, we might not even know where they are. But each branch should have a valve to shut it off. And once we shut it off, we can get that sprinkler head to stop, flowing water. But then the whole system has got to be reset. So they'll replace that sprinkler head, open everything back up, and reset the system. And that's something that the alarm company is actually going to have to come back out to do. Because we don't do the sprinkler heads and mess with any of that stuff. All right, any other questions? So we prepared each of y'all a kind of a bag with a couple of handouts in it. One of them talks about like the fire, the stove safety aspects of it. Another one talks about emergency preparedness, which is a whole other conversation that we could get into as far as like not fire safety in and of itself, but like what to do in a case of a storm, like a hurricane or something like that. Being without power for long periods of time. So that's, like I said, a whole other topic of conversation. You guys can look over that. One of the things that we always suggest as far as emergency preparedness is to have a plan put together so that you know where you're going to be if you need to evacuate. So if we have to evacuate the city of Richmond, where are you going to go? Okay. So if you think about some of the larger scale events that have happened inside the United States, we've had to evacuate entire retirement communities or entire hospitals. And so that's where some of that stuff comes into play. So if you know what you're going to do individually and you have that plan in place, you'll have that peace of mind knowing that, hey, this is where I'm going to go. I'm going to go stay with my daughter, my son, in a different state, if that might be the case. All right? Making sure you have food and water if you need it for an extended period of time. 72 hours is a minimum of what we suggest, but with some of the larger scale events, the hurricanes and tornadoes that have come through, we have found out that it takes longer than 72 hours to access some of the remote communities when it comes to getting help to them. So, having more is always better. So, just have a plan. Any questions for me? Well, thank y'all for coming out and visiting with me.